All right, welcome to the first official episode of Left Turns, Right Hooks. I'm your host, Dan Lindsay. Thanks for coming along with this journey. Can't wait to see what lies ahead for us. But tonight, we're talking NASCAR and WWE. Tonight, I got 4 topics in NASCAR to talk about, and we're going to get some wrestling talk. My good friend Tyler's going to join us as well, but we'll get that in just a little bit. Let's hit some NASCAR first. So let's get to turn 1, a look at this past week's Atlanta race. In Atlanta, Joe Logano won. Great performance by him. Good push by his teammate Ryan Blaney. Ford's dominated. I should say Penske really dominated in that race. Not all Fords did well, but the Penske Fords did a great job in this race. All 3 finishing in the top 10 with, again, Logano winning, Ryan Blaney coming in third, and Austin Cindric, yes, the guy that I said would miss the playoffs. I might regret that. He finished 10th. 9 of your top 10 finishers were all playoff drivers. Just really solidifying the fact that these guys are here to play, and they have the cars, they have the talent to really do a good job. So the only non-playoff driver that finished in the top 10, Kyle Busch. He's still looking for his first win of this season, and to keep that streak going of at least one win every year for the last 19 years. Hopefully this year, number 20. I'm definitely rooting for Kyle Busch to get that win this year. Let's get back to Penske. I mean, they're doing a really good job right now. At the beginning of the year, it looked like it was going to be JGR versus Hendrick. It was going to be all 4. It was going to be 4v4. Just all these guys are going to dominate. Summer comes along. Penske finds it. Keselowski gets a win. He hasn't gotten a win in a couple years. So Ford's finally found something, and they got collaborating. Penske really hit their stride with Blaney and Cindric both getting wins. Logano getting a win in there too, and just having a better summer before the playoffs started. So kudos to them. And I think it's now a 3-team race really to see who gets the most teams into that final 8, and especially that championship 4. Penske made a really, really good statement in Atlanta. Like I said, I'm probably going to regret putting Cindric as one of the first 4 out, but there's still 2 races left. Anything can happen. I think Cindric's pretty good in Watkins Glen, so I mean, if he can get a solid finish there, that'll keep him in the hunt. He's definitely above that cut line right now. And Bristol could be chaotic. And if he can keep his nose clean in Bristol, he might make him prove me wrong. Time will tell, I think, if it's Penske that's strong, or if all the Fords are strong. Keselowski and Chase Briscoe are both below that cut line right now. Keselowski right in the bubble. Briscoe involved in an early wreck in Atlanta. That's already got him behind the 8 ball, really down in the standings right now. But again, it's only the first race, and I'll get to who I'm thinking might have a chance at winning Watkins Glen later here. But let's keep on talking about Atlanta race though with turn 2. Turn 2 is going to be the Hamlin strategy that everybody is talking about this week, and a lot of people are giving him a hard time. I'm personally not going to give him a hard time. I don't blame him at all for doing what he did. Now, Atlanta is being called a super speedway by some. It's not a super speedway. Let's get that straight. It's not as big as Daytona or even Talladega. It's a 1.5-mile track. It acts like a super speedway. If you want to call it a drafting track, sure, but you draft at every track. It's been resurfaced, but let's get this straight. I did not grow up with Atlanta being a super speedway. It's a speedway. They're all speedways. It's just a matter of the size of the track. Atlanta's not a super speedway. It does involve drafting. But that's just such a intermediate track. Maybe there's too many intermediate tracks where we got to kind of decipher them. But if we're going to start calling Atlanta Super Speedway, we got to start calling Michigan Super Speedway. I don't blame Denny Hamlin at all for sitting in the back there. It didn't work out for him. He got involved in a wreck at the very end of the race when he was probably trying to finally make some moves. Some are arguing that he could have gone up and tried to get some stage points in the first stage or second stage or both, and then hung out in the back and make a late push. There is something to be said about analytics within sports, and I think that even more in NASCAR, saying, hey, if I know I can get this many points in this race, that's a good chunk to get enough points to get through this first round. And a lot of drivers are a little bit worried about these first 3 races just because so many things happen. It doesn't take much to cause a big wreck. We didn't get that in Atlanta like we did in the spring. We thought it might happen. Looked like it was going to happen a few different times. I think Hamlin, was like, I'll see if they wreck, and if they do, I'll be there to pick up the pieces, finish top 15, maybe even the top 10. So I don't blame him at all for this. But speaking of Hamlin and his team that he co-owns with Michael Jordan, let's turn to turn 3 here and talk about charters. Yes, we're going to talk about charters here. Now, I'm not going to claim to be an expert on this. I've been doing a lot of research the last 2 weeks and trying to just understand this more. Wasn't really planning to talk about it already, but we apparently have an agreement, and 13 of the 15 teams actually signed this agreement. But one of the big things that teams wanted was a bigger revenue share, and apparently that's what they're getting with this new charter agreement. But I think the one big thing that some teams, specifically 2311 and additionally Front Motorsports, are looking at these as like they're more than just like a race team. They're a franchise, and I think they're trying to compare NASCAR to other major league sports, where you have a set of owners, you have a CBA, you have a players union, you have all this stuff to where, and you can't. That doesn't quite fit the NASCAR mold. So I think the charters are kind of that replacement. I don't think the charters were looked at by NASCAR though as a here's a franchise for you that you can buy and hold forever. I don't think NASCAR wants to do that at all. And that's why this agreement's for 7 years. This agreement's for 7 years because that's the latest TV deal. I don't know if that was really a smart move though, because we just don't know what the TV deal is going to look like, and they're going to start streaming next year. I believe it's 8 or I think even 10 races that are all going to be streaming only. And that's going to really be something different that NASCAR hasn't experienced for. That's either not going to bring as much revenue in as they think, or it's going to completely exceed the revenue numbers that they're going to come in for that. And then we're going to see these numbers, or the owners are. We won't as fans because NASCAR's private. They don't want stuff opened up. I know they're saying it's really tight-lipped, not a lot of media coverage. The negotiations aren't public like you might see for players on new teams and free agency for the NFL or NBA, something like that, or baseball especially. But I think that's what some of these owners are wanting to do. It's like, hey, sports have franchises, so let's make the Chargers a franchise. And I don't think that's NASCAR's idea, which I think is a little short-sighted, honestly. I think they should be looking at that, but I don't blame them for doing a contract that's based, on these charters based on the TV contract. But I feel like they should have it. Hopefully, maybe they do. We don't know this yet, but it's supposedly another option for another agreement won't come up for another 7 years. Now, I think that should be shorter. Again, we have streaming rights next year. Let's see how that goes. Does that bring in enough revenue to cover what we think it's going to cover? Will it exceed, coverage of revenue? And I hope it does. Something new that NASCAR is going to do. They're doing some fun little things around those 10 races are going to be just streamed through Prime, or Prime is at least part of those. And I think there's potential for a lot of things here for them to, really be able to take advantage of. But that remains to be seen. So that's why I feel like this charter agreement being 7 years, I don't think that's good. Hopefully they can kind of renegotiate again in 3 years. Considering the fact that they've been trying to negotiate for this new contract that's been signed by 13 of the 15 teams, and they've been talking about this for over 2 years now. Maybe they start talking about this in another 2 years, and it's like, hey, it took us this long to get this one. Maybe we need to start talking about it sooner. So hopefully there's an option within this agreement to maybe at least restructure the payout of revenue, because it's not cheap to run these NASCAR teams. That's why someone like Dale Earnhardt Jr. doesn't want to own a Cup team, because the expenses are so much more than it is for an Xfinity car. And Xfinity cars aren't cheap either, but there's at least a little bit less of investment for racing a number of Xfinity teams, versus getting brand new into NASCAR. And you have to buy a charter now, which is 20, 30, upwards of $40 million. We don't know the details of what Stewart Haas has done and selling their charters. We probably won't know that till the end of the year, or even right before Daytona next year. Front Row, Spire, they've bought into some of these, and they've had to pay 20, 30 million, upwards of 20, $30 million reportedly, for their charters. So I mean, it can't be cheap. It's not cheap at all for a new team to break into the sport. Um, and I think that's why a charter agreement needs to be good, because teams that decide, oh, hey, in 5 years we don't want to be a part of this, well, let's sell ours and make our money back, maybe a little bit more, maybe we make a profit, which is hard to do. You don't you don't just get into NASCAR to make a profit. You just learn how to mitigate your losses and hope you win a lot of races. That's why we've seen 2311 do well, because they're winning. Tyler Reddick's winning races. He's finishing well. So is Bubba Wallace, and they've built a really good team in just 5 years. And the things to invest in Michael Jordan. But and they're the one team that isn't signing this agreement as of right now, and I don't blame them. I think of anybody that understands CBAs and players unions, it's Michael Jordan. So I think he's maybe looking at this maybe a little too much like an NBA franchise. So I think that's why we have a big divide here. NASCAR is right here to where it's like no, we don't want franchises. Michael Jordan's like, of course this is a franchise. I mean, I invested heavily into this. If I didn't want to invest heavily in this, I wouldn't be so invested in this charter agreement. I hope this doesn't go to court. That's I think that's worst case scenario. I think if that goes to court, NASCAR is just going to be tied up in litigation that they don't need to be tied up in. I don't think it'll be a good look for Michael Jordan in 2311. I think even an even worse look for NASCAR. So maybe 2311 comes back to the table at the end of the season and says, okay, we'll sign it, but you still need to do one more thing for us. Maybe there is something with language in the contract of saying like teams that have basically been gifted charters, like Hendrick, Penske, JGR, they've been in the sport forever, so they kind of just were like, yeah, you have a charter. Of course you do. You don't have to pay anything for that because you've always been a team. Whereas a new team, new teams like Front Row, like Spire, especially 2311 that have invested so much money, it's been a bit different, and that's why I think there's so hung up on some details. But hopefully both sides come to an agreement here soon. And I really, a lot of the research I've done, big thanks to a couple of the big writers for the Athletic out in there and out there, Jordan Bianchi, Jeff Gluck. A lot of this information that I've been able to start to decipher is thanks to them. They reported back in I believe March or April that NASCAR was stopped going to this TNC, a team negotiation committee that a few teams that formed this alliance called the Race Team Alliance, and they use this negotiation team. And NASCAR kind of stopped going to that team and started going to just race teams individually. So I could see why that might be a disconnect for 2311. Maybe they promised 2311 something and 2311 didn't see it in the contract. And I think it's a little weird that, NASCAR was like, hey, right before the playoffs, here's this 105-page contract that you have 6 hours to sign. I'm sure most of these teams have seen the majority of this contract, and there probably weren't that many changes. I'm guessing. It's kind of impossible to read 105 pages in 6 hours. It's like, okay, I guess we're signing it. I can see some teams like, fine, we want to make sure we stay in the sport, so we'll sign it no matter what. And I think the big teams like Penske, like JGR, like Hendrick, it's easier for them to do that because they're the big sponsor getters. They have a lot of big names, a lot of big sponsors, some of the best drivers. So I think it's, and again, they didn't have to invest as much as Hamlin, Jordan, and their crew have for 2311. I do find it interesting, too, that JGR is on this. It's like, so Hamlin's got to be in a weird spot, too. He's driving for a team, and his charter is secured. He knows he's got a spot as a driver, but then his team that he co-owns, his cars aren't necessarily guaranteed a charter right now. So I find that very interesting. I would have thought that if 2311 wasn't going to sign, that JGR might not sign either, just to align, just everybody to be aligned there, and then Toyota just being aligned. I mean, huge, big deal, even bigger deal if your two big bases for Toyota are not going to sign this agreement. Um, that could have caused a lot more chaos and stuff. So I'm very surprised by that. I find it very interesting that Hamlin the driver, he's fine for next year, but Hamlin the owner may not have cars in NASCAR next year. I don't know, because I mean you don't necessarily have to have a charter to race in NASCAR, which I know I've definitely kind of picked up and learned on. It guarantees you a spot, but you can also race yourself in. I think there's two other teams that are one car outfits that pop up in like 12, maybe not even 10, 12 races a year. Because it's like, hey, we know we can race well at these tracks. We're not going to go race at Bristol, wreck our car in 5 laps and just waste a bunch of money. But we know we have a good shot at Daytona, Talladega. We'll go to both those races every year. Um, so I mean, 2311 could go that way because they do have major investors, including Michael Jordan, to where they could probably, uh, you know, survive a little while, um, just running without a charter, but not having a charter misses out on that revenue sharing and eventually those books are going to be so much read to where it's like, is it really worth us to run them? So like 2311 needs the charters. So again, I hope they come to the table at the end of the season here at least. I think you know, Reddick's, in the hunt for the championship. Hamlin's got to focus on the championship. I don't think he's really too worried about the Chargers at the moment. So hopefully at the end of the season, we see 2311 and Front Row Motorsports come back to the table and say, all right, we'll sign, or can we get this one more thing before we sign for all the teams? So I hope something comes to here, because again, the biggest consequence of possible lawsuits and stuff, I don't think it's a good look for Jordan, even worse for NASCAR. So I think they have to do something very soon, or they're in trouble. But let's take one final turn here. Turn 4, we're going to talk about Watkins Glen before we sign off on the NASCAR side here. Watkins Glen road course, one of 2 road courses in the playoffs. Should be an interesting race. I think we're going to see basically the Hendrick domination again. Hendrick has 3 of the 4 Hendrick drivers have won a road course this year already. The only guy that hasn't done it is Chase Elliott, so that'd be cool to see Chase Elliott pull it off here. I don't think he will though. If anybody's going to pull it off, it's going to be William Byron though with Hendrick. I mean, hope Chase does. That'd be great, but I think Byron is. We haven't really heard much of him since the beginning of the year. So I hope that he does well here. He's definitely on the Sims a lot. He knows this track pretty well. Does well here. So I think if anybody in the Hendrick camp that's going to win it, it's probably going to be him. Somebody that I've been hearing talking about from the Penske camp is Austin Cindric. I told you I'm going to regret this. Regret taking him in my first 4 out. So we'll see here. So if he does well here, he's probably pretty much moving on to the round of 12. I've heard he might be fine. He's kind of might be maybe my sleeper pick. I expect Tyler Reddick to be well here. Christopher Bell. Ty Gibbs hasn't won this season, but I don't really think he doesn't really do great at Watkins Glen. He'd be a fun surprise, but I don't really expect him to be up there. Hamlin's gotten better and better every time he goes out to a road course. Watkins Glen is one of his better road courses. He needs a good finish. I think he really needs a top 15, and if he can get some stage points on one of the 3 stages, even better for him to make sure he keeps his playoff outlook good. At the end of the day, I think I'm going with one of the cars that Hamlin owns. Reddick does very, very well here. Average finish of 8 in his races at Watkins Glen in his career. He's been good all year, very consistent. One, if not the most consistent driver in the whole playoffs. So I think this is just another chance for him to show how strong he is. Logano is a good track driver on road courses. Blaney's not too bad either. Kyle Busch will be fun to watch again. RCR has been doing something right the last 6 weeks. Kyle's finished top 10, I think 5 in each of the last 5 races. He was runner up in 3 of those. So he's just knocking out the store. I don't know if he'll pull it off here, but I mean, he's not a bad road course driver either. But my pick for Watkins Glen coming up here will be Tyler Reddick. Again, regular season champion, so we need him to show up. Congrats to Joey from last week. Good to see him punch his ticket to the round of 12. I think Tyler does it this week. And we'll talk more NASCAR next week. All right, welcome to the Right Hooks portion of this podcast, our very first episode. And I couldn't not have one of my great friends, Tyler, come along here for the Right Hooks portion where we talk about WWE. Tyler, thank you so much for coming on, joining me today in this first episode. I'm really excited for this journey in the podcast world, and can't thank you enough for being part of this for the first episode.
Dan, the man, thank you so much for having me. I'm very, very honored, obviously, to be your first guest on the podcast here. I was so excited when you talked to me about this. Obviously, I've been rooting for you since day one to kind of get this thing done. Love the name, by the way. I know I've said that to you off camera a bunch of times, but I got to say it on camera. The proof is out there now. I can't deny it. If anybody says something to me, Tyler didn't like the name, I'm lying. I have to say it right here. Love the name. And I am very excited to talk to you about this. And by the way, folks, if you do happen to see my podcast, I made sure to make sure you guys came over here to see this portion of the podcast at the end of the video. I wanted to let you know that as well. So, Dan, thanks so much for having me on, man.
Yeah, no, we talked baseball the other day. I did a little bit of a NASCAR portion now, and I have now changed my hat this way around, so we know it's WWE time.
That's right.
It's the lucky hat WWE. Even though I'm horrible on picks, we're not picking anything today. We're just going to talk about some storylines. on both brands.
Right.
But I'm excited to have you on for this portion of the pod, and just looking forward to this. So you've been a great help and been one of the few inspirations behind me starting this. So the other day I'm just like, I just got to do this. I think I've been so afraid of doing it, and I'm just like, you know what, just start it. I almost started on a whim. I'm like, okay, I got to do this now.
That's
But I'm
that's
looking forward to it.
sometimes that's all you need. You gotta give it a whirl. Sometimes the first step is the hardest step. So you took that first step, run with it, man. I'm rooting for you, and I'll be here to obviously help you as much as I can. And try not to screw it up for you. That's really the goal.
Yeah, no, you won't. No, we've had great discussions with WWE stuff, and I'm looking forward to this. So let's kick this off. Raw's been very interesting, very good product. I feel over the last few months, 6 9 months, Judgment Day storylines that's changed. What are one or two of your favorite storylines going on Raw, on the Raw product right now?
Sure. So I love this question because it kind of almost eliminates the who's your favorite wrestler kind of deal of what we typically have. Like, who are some of your favorite wrestlers to watch? Who are your favorite wrestlers? Like who whatever the question is, and however the question is framed, that kind of eliminates that kind of stuff for me. Because my favorite wrestler on the brand right now is Ilya Dragunov, but he's not necessarily in a quote unquote storyline that I can point out. So it's not necessarily, I can't just say that. So I had to kind of really think about this. So I have two. And I'm going to focus on one because we're going to focus on another one of the storylines a little bit later on in this podcast. So I don't want to spoil that for anybody. The two are the Wyatt Six stuff, which we'll talk about but the other one that I'm really loving right now is what they are doing with Bronson Reed. I have
Mm.
always been a champion of Bronson Reed. I really liked him, obviously, as Jonah in New Japan as well, where he really started to break out and have great matches as just a giant heel. And those types of characters, for those of you who are maybe uninitiated as to the Japanese wrestling scene or are just completely unfamiliar with it, big foreign, and by foreign, I mean American in their sense, because obviously they're in Japan,
Right.
big giant foreign bad guys are beloved in Japan. Now, not every time, obviously, but you just look at somebody like A Train, who ended up coming back to WWE as Tensai over a decade ago now. My goodness, I'm old. Like he was so over in Japan that WWE basically just like we got to bring him back. He must be much better than he was now, and he wasn't. They, guys like him get over in Japan a little bit better than they may over here at times. So kind of similar thing happened with Jonah and obviously Bronson Reed. He got released from WWE. It did not make any sense to me at the time why he got released. He was doing really well. He had lost the North American Championship like 2 weeks before he got released. Like it's not like he was just doing nothing. Like he was on the show. He was on NXT and he was doing really well. And then he was just gone. And he went to Japan, came back, and he'd been kind of floundering for a while. But now it looks like they are at least more so giving him that big push and kind of showcasing his physicality. He absolutely annihilated Seth Rollins. He absolutely annihilated R-Truth. He's now absolutely annihilating Braun Strowman. And
Which is a
Braun Strowman's a
surprise. Like
yeah,
Braun Strowman is a big dude. Like I've always kind of watched, loved watching Braun Strowman, and the Braun Strowman storyline is one of mine too. So I think it'd be fun to kind of go back and forth here with this, but yeah, the Braun Strowman jumping on top of him on top of a car, that was just wow.
yeah.
But yeah, no, I love what Reed's doing. We talked about him a lot, when we were started our series on your pod, kind of booking through WrestleMania. We talked about him at Chamber, being involved in a lot of triple threat matches. We were wanting to see him focus in those more, and he was here and there, but he was always kind of the guy that always got pinned. He was there to take the pin, and now they're finally focusing on him in the storyline, and I can't be more grateful for that because it's about time.
Yeah, absolutely. It is certainly about time. And it almost kind of, now listen, you and I have spoken on my channel so many hours about how much we love Braun Breaker, right? But it almost kind of makes me wish that they hadn't have pulled the trigger so early on Braun, because I think that Bronson Reed would have made a fantastic, a virtually perfect foil to beat Sami Zayn in his current character.
Mm-hmm.
I think Bronson Reed would have been the absolute right choice to take the Intercontinental Championship from Sami Zayn, the ultimate underdog, but not even he can conquer this monster of Bronson Reed that we have right now. Who can conquer this monster of Bronson Reed? And then, if that was what you were going to do, the timeline works out perfect to where you can still do what you're doing with Bronson Reed right now. He can go out and destroy Seth Rollins. He can go out and destroy R-Truth. He can go out and destroy his next challenger for the Intercontinental Championship, which is pick on someone your own size, Braun Strowman, and even he gets annihilated. Oh my god, like it would have been a perfect story, but unfortunately that's not the way it went. And again, I'm very happy that Braun Breaker's Intercontinental Champion. Obviously, nothing to take away from him. He was kind of in a similar spot, right, where he was killing everybody, so he went to that all made sense. But again, it kind of just makes you think, what if, right? And another what if, there was a promo that Bronson Reed cut all the way back in January or February of this year, where he said there's a champion on Raw that has a target on their back and he doesn't even know it yet. And pretty much immediately, Seth Rollins tore his MCL like that night, I think. I'm pretty sure it was that Raw
Yeah,
and
yeah,
against Jinder Mahal, and Seth could no longer wrestle. So, was Seth Rollins going to be defending the championship against Bronson
yeah. I
Reed
wonder.
one on one in Australia?
Oh man.
Probably.
Yep. Yep.
I think it's safe to say that's what we were going to have. And then obviously with this Intercontinental Championship tournament, I would have been pretty shocked if Bronson Reed didn't win where Braun Strowman won. I mean, 2 plus 2 equals 4. Bronson Reed was in the match. Braun Strowman took his place. Braun Strowman won. I mean, it just makes sense that Bronson Reed would have won. So there's just all these different things. And then maybe Braun Strowman comes out and attacks him the way that he did to Strowman. So like you just kind of move pieces around, but I love what they're doing with him. I hope that he gets a big win over Braun Strowman, maybe at Bad Blood or maybe just on Raw here in the next couple of weeks, or even on this upcoming Monday. I'm not sure, but I love what they're doing with Bronson Reed right now.
Yeah. Now, and you're talking about the World Heavyweight Championship with Seth at it. Do you think they're building Bronson Reed to challenge for the IC title later this year, or even beginning of next year when Netflix takes over Raw, or when Raw
Uh,
goes to
I
Netflix?
think I think you certainly could. The only thing is you can do babyface versus babyface matchups, and that happens pretty frequently, honestly. Especially down in NXT, that happens all the time with good guys versus good guys for number one contenders matches, and it's just all in good sport because you could tell a story. Not everybody has to turn on everybody all the time. Like that's just how it goes. But I feel like bad guy versus bad guy, you're really running the risk of not having a ton of fan interest in that, regardless of who the two characters are that are in the match. It doesn't really matter that Braun Breaker is already super popular with the crowd. He just is. When he yelled at Pat McAfee, "Are there any dogs barking in Austin?" and every single person started barking in the arena, despite the fact that he's a bad guy. Like, that tells you all you need to know. He's over for sure, but he's still a bad guy. So, like, how
Yeah.
much intrigue fan wise is there going to be there? Now, would I like to see that match? Of course I would. Who wouldn't want to see two just big beefy dudes just going at it, right?
Yeah.
That would be a lot of fun. But at the same time, it's tough. Unless you're having Breaker lose the championship at some point in the next few months, which is certainly possible depending on the story. It could be Jay. It could
Yeah.
be Jay. I wouldn't mind it being Jay. I think he deserves a singles title at some point.
Yeah.
But who knows? It may not be as well. So I think you could do it. I'd certainly love to see it, depending on if the story is there and correct, and then maybe from there you have Ilya take it. That would be a lovely thing.
Sure. Of course. Yeah, and you've definitely made me more fan of Ilya, and we've talked with him on and off a lot as well. And it was good to see him finally back on Raw again.
Yep.
Get winning his triple threat to get into the fatal four way, and I'm glad he didn't take the pin because I was half afraid he was going to take the pin in that fatal four way. Thank goodness he didn't.
Yeah.
Then that's honestly my kind of like my second storyline with the IC title right now is you got Jake going after it. He's super popular. It's like he's had like chance to go get a title, but they keep not giving him a title. and it's like, they've had some very nice confrontations between Braun and Jay, calling back to their family history, which I think is stupendous. I love it so much. I'm hoping they, I don't know. Well, I'll be curious to see what they do, but it'd be awesome to see kind of them go for like 2 or 3 matches. But at the same time, when I could see it just be kind of a one-off and just, obviously we both love Braun. We have a whole video dedicated to it on your channel talking about Braun
Yep.
Breaker and stuff. And I love it. I hope they keep building them up and just kind of lining up opponents. And I think kind of, I like that storyline with the Bronson Reed storyline because I think they'll eventually kind of merge. It's like, hopefully we get something to the effect of, Jay challenging a couple times, not winning it. Then Bronson Reed comes after it once, but he doesn't get it. Strowman's like, "Well, I'm the next man up. Let's do it." And then we get these, multi-man matches between Braun, and, and Bronson,
Braun and Bronson. So
and
creative.
do a triple threat with the 3Bs, and throw Jay in there for a fatal 4-way, like maybe the first night that Raw's on Netflix, and
Maybe.
'cause I think got to be building up a really, really big Raw episode for Netflix, that debut episode. And I
Yeah.
can't wait for that. To not have to wait a day to watch Raw because I don't have cable, so I'll be able to actually watch it. That night and stuff, and
Yeah.
so be fun. I think I hope they kind of build up really big matches for both titles that night and stuff. But yeah, I think I'm intrigued to see where they go. To where that's. I'm intrigued to see where they go with that IC title, with Bronson, because I think you could do stuff with Bronson and Braun and keep them busy. Throw Sheamus in there, maybe keep them all busy until you want to put one of them in the title picture. We've talked about this at length too, where they're building a great undercard right now
Yeah.
on the Raw product. They have been, for a while now, and now they're just kind of having to refresh that undercard because it's new champions, but they're doing a good job. They have a lot of good side stories, and it'll be interesting to see how it comes together, who's the next challenger. But I think for at least the rest of this year, we're just gonna see contender lineup one after another for the IC title. It's like, nah, he couldn't take Bronson, or he couldn't take Breaker. I could take him. Oh, he couldn't. I could take him. I think we're just gonna get that
Yeah.
one-upmanship, and hopefully that eventually, maybe it starts with a fatal 4-way and then it goes on to individual. I don't know. You can do so many different things. But yeah, those two storylines merge into, I think they'll eventually merge. I like them both on Raw right now.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for me personally, and this is just kind of a selfish type deal, man, would I love to see a few months of Ilya having that IC title, and then John Cena versus Ilya Dragunov for the Intercontinental Championship, and John Cena is the one that goes over and takes it from Ilya. I think that would just be so much fun because like obviously maybe there's people that watch this that are familiar with Ilya Dragunov now that he's on Raw and have just kind of seen him wrestle a few times and may be impressed with what they see. But if that's where you've seen him and that's what you've seen of him, you have no idea what that man is capable of. You have no earthly idea what the man is willing to put his body through and to put other people's body through, by the way. Because he's willing to get kicked in the head as hard as humanly possible because he wants to kick you in the head as hard as humanly possible, and you can't get mad at him because he's like, well, you can just kick me twice as hard and it's fine. Like, just do whatever you want. You ever notice that he bleeds in like half his matches by accident just because he asks everybody to hit him in the face over and over again?
Yeah. No, you say that. Yeah.
So that's something that just happens for him, right? He fought Ricochet and was bleeding from his forehead. Ricochet doesn't do striking very often, right? Like it's not,
No.
he just doesn't, right? So it's just kind of how it goes. But anyway, point being, I would really like to see that story because um the story at that point would just be I'm the only human being alive that's more intense and tenacious than you are. But it doesn't, I don't think it hurts because like, for me, like if you tried to do Braun Breaker versus John Cena and you put John Cena over, it's so unrealistic to me that I couldn't even understand. I'd be like, do you have any idea how much better of an athlete this guy is than John Rennie? He's 50 years old. Like,
Yeah.
no, you're not keeping up with that freak of nature. But But while Ilya is also incredibly athletic, and while Ilya has durability and tenacity for days and intensity for days, I could see John Cena overpowering him enough over a period of a match
Mm-hmm.
that it could wear Ilya down at a certain point because he's John Cena, because he's Superman, right? Like that makes sense to me. So like I wouldn't mind too much. But anyway, we're getting way ahead of ourselves here.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, but with
We'll start fantasy booking Cena stuff soon though. I'm
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're in September. January cannot come soon enough. I'm so excited to kind of just see where they go with that. So yeah, super excited.
yeah. So what's your other storyline that you really like going on right now?
Yeah, so it's a good transition. So the Wyatt Six storyline that they have, I am super intrigued with that because you know we haven't talked about Bray Wyatt on my channel very much, if at
Mhm.
all. And for me, that's been on purpose because to me, I'm not sure how much value I can add to what everybody has already said about the man
Right.
and what they meant to him as a performer. That stuff almost doesn't even matter at a point because what matters is the wife and the kids that he left behind and the legacy of being a good human being that he left behind, which I obviously can't speak to. I never met the man, but I'm sure he was wonderful. Regardless, that's one of the reasons why I am so in love with that story right now. It's because they are you can tell that every single thing that they do, every action that they take, every word that they speak, everything that is done with that storyline is a tribute to him. And what I'm also really loving about it is you can just tell that obviously none of those wrestlers are related in any way, shape, or form. They're not actually family. They all come from different backgrounds. They all come from different walks of life. Some were born into wrestling, some were not. Some are from out of the some are born out of this country, some were born in this country.
Yeah.
But you can tell that playing those characters and the reason they play those characters brings them together and actually kind of makes them this beautiful family. Like after every match, after every big moment, they're hugging each other. They're they're just tributing Bray Wyatt with everything that they do. I mean, my gosh, dude, Bo Dallas even sounds like him sometimes. There's certain I can't point out a specific word or a specific phrase that he said, but there are times when I listen to him say his promos that he sounds like Bray Wyatt, like vocally, not necessarily with the message, although yes, that too, but his actual voice sounds like Bray. Obviously, they're brothers, so that's not super shocking, but it tugs at your heartstrings when you can hear
Mhm.
that. And so I love what they're doing. The tough part is going to be keeping it to where it makes sense and keeping it as realistic as this spooky supernatural like group can be.
Mhm.
Now, we haven't seen too much of the supernatural portion of it yet, which I like because I think that's oftentimes where WWE really went off the wagon with Bray
Mhm.
was they tried to make him like inhuman to
Yeah.
where like he had all these bug powers or he kicked out of 97 curb stomps because he was a serial killer monster like or whatever it is, right? Like that's where they get off the rails and they haven't done that yet. That could happen, but yet they haven't. And so I'm happy that they haven't done that. And again, that's one of the main reasons why I love this is because they're telling a story that all of us can relate to. Hey, this guy that we all loved is no longer here. All of these wrestlers that you see here were forgotten about, were not really cared about, were underused, were not really cared for, were whatever, and now they are brought together under this unifying light of Bray Wyatt's legacy,
Mhm.
and Bo Dallas is leading the charge, who's Bray Wyatt's flesh and blood,
Yep.
and it's a beautiful story so far, and I love that they took the masks off. I love that they are wrestling as themselves. I love that the commentators are calling them Nikki Cross, Eric Rowan, Joe
Yes.
Gacy, Dexter Loomis. I love that they're not just saying Peppa Pig, Huskus the or what, not Peppa Pig, Huskus the Pig Boy, Abby the Witch. Like they're not saying all those Peppa Pig. What am I, an idiot? Like I like shit, I'm very tired. Like they're not saying that because Vince would have. Vince would have just made them wrestle in these masks and called them Huskus the Pig Boy and Abby the Witch. And, oh, who was under the mask? I'll never know. Like
Right.
that's what it
Right.
would have been, and they're not doing that. So
Yeah.
I love it. I think that I honestly don't think they've done a single thing wrong or poorly so far.
Yeah.
Now that may be controversial. I don't know, but what do you think?
I mean, yeah, I think there's definitely some different opinions on the family. In a sense, it's kind of I think it's kind of cool too. It's Eric Rowan has been part of two different Wyatt families a little bit now. Because he was with the original Wyatt. And rest in peace, some good guys from that. With Bray and both. Sort of Luke Harper. Was the character
Rest in
name?
peace to him too.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's really neat just from the aspect of Eric and Bo just doing this together. Then you bring in, Dexter and help me out with the fourth.
Joe
Gacy.
Gacy and Nikki
Gacy.
Cross. Yeah.
Yeah. Then you have Nikki Cross in it too. So to me, it's really interesting in some respects. To where it's like you kind of see some mirroring from the first Wyatt family. Alexa Bliss was linked to Bray just separately outside of the Wyatt family, post Wyatt family. And I feel like, now you have Nikki Cross in there. We haven't gotten Alyssa Bliss back yet. So I
Mhm.
think you could do some really interesting things down the road.
Yeah.
Braun's out there. I know some people are like, oh, I should bring, Alexa Bliss in and Braun Strowman in. It's like I don't. That's not the purpose here. That's not.
No.
It's not the purpose at all. You hit it perfectly. Where it's like, they brought in forgotten people. I think it's been a nice touch. And I think that leaves it open for, maybe changing out members every once in a while or something like that. It's like someone else goes on or something. I think uh, possibilities are endless. I think with how they're doing it, I think they've been putting on really good matches with American Made. Chad
Yes.
Gable has been really good at just selling the terror of everything, and being like strong. Trying to be very I'm ready to take this on, but still kind of running away cowardly at the same time. It's really nice to see that with his character. Something that we've never really seen from him before. I think in an interview I actually heard him say once is like, yeah, he wanted to take this turn as a heel and run with it. He wanted to do something different. He's very invested in doing something different with his character,
Sure.
and we can tell. And I think that's they're a great good first foil for the White Six, and
Yeah.
the supernatural stuff isn't quite my cup of tea. I probably appreciated Bray more. Like I always liked the White family. They were a good foil for Roman and the Shield and stuff, and um, so I always appreciated that. It took me a little bit to come around on just the Bray Wyatt character. Um, just as far as like my interest level in it, nothing against it. It was you know, it was just not my cup of tea at the moment. So I'm like,
Yeah.
this was a little bit for me to kind of get used to at the time, but I've come around to it more. I like that they're not leaning into the supernatural too heavy right now. I'm not saying that they won't or they can't. I do like the more of the realism. There's still that spooky. There's still I think fun act it's amazing just to see a storyline that's not revolving around a title. you know, not
Yeah.
that eventually you couldn't take two or three of those guys to go through the tag titles or something, but I don't think that's the intention with that faction. So it's like it'd be cool to see that, but I don't think that's what their intention is going to be at least in the short term. That remains to be seen, but um, I think the fact that it's like new faction, what titles are they going after? That's not their purpose at all right now. Talking about the Wyatt Six, kind of the current storyline right now, that gives us a great segue into what's going to come next with them. I'm very unsure what's going to kind of happen next. That's something I'd like to see them do, but I'm very very curious what you think they might do because I know you're really invested in the storyline.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely am. And this is actually, I'm glad. I love this question because I've been wanting to talk about it. I've honestly been debating just doing a solo video of just me on my channel doing this, but I'm glad I'm able to kind of do this here. And this is going to kind of be like not only what I want them to do for the Wyatt Six, but kind of some elements that I wish that they had done with the Fiend that I thought could have made him as a character more effective and built him better long term, right? So, okay. One of my biggest pet peeves, actually, before I even get into that, I would just end the storyline right now with American Made. I don't think there's any other new ground that you're going to be breaking if you continue it. Sure, maybe you can get away with another Chad versus Uncle Howdy match on a pay per view, perhaps, and make it like a specialty match where like it's just like different and Uncle Howdy wins and then you stop it. Maybe you can get away with that. But for me personally, I would just end it because there few things are bigger pet peeves in wrestling for me than storylines that are going way too long but are one-sided. If a storyline goes a little bit too long, that happens. It's fine. People pay to see that stuff. That's okay. But if one side just loses 8 times in a row, like and you just keep on making them lose to the same people, like that's not entertaining to me. That's actually annoying because I feel like you're just burying that person or that team or that whoever, right? And for me, you know, you already lost the one-on-one match to Uncle Howdy if you're Chad Gable. You lost a 2-on-2 tag match and you lost a 4-on-4. I think you might have even lost a 3-on-3. Like you've
Yeah.
literally lost at all 4 levels. You've L, and L. There's no new ground to cover at that point, unless you bring in a fifth member of American Made and then you do 5-on-5. And guess what? You're gonna lose there. So like to me, it doesn't matter. Like few storylines bothered me more than AJ Styles versus Samoa Joe back in like 2018 or whatever that was. Samoa Joe, I think it was 5 straight pay-per-views he faced AJ Styles for the WWE Championship, and 5 straight pay-per-views he lost. Did you have to? Did you have to kill Samoa Joe's career at that? I mean, honestly, did you have to? And like
Those
that's
are
kind of how I felt about it. And so to me, I'm not saying that this is going to kill Chad Gable's career if he loses again. It's obviously not, but it's just annoying to me. So I would just end the storyline. And so here's a few mistakes that I think WWE made with the Fiend that I don't want them to make with the Wyatt Six that are also kind of reasoning my kind of thought process and storyline for this, right? That I didn't say that properly at all, but you track what I'm saying. I think that the immediate mistake that they made, obviously, was they made the Fiend fight Seth Rollins for the championship immediately. Obviously, that was a mistake. Now, most people look at it as, oh, you put him in a main event spot way too early. I actually don't even think that was the problem. I think convincing people that a serial killer monster cares about belts was the problem. I actually think that if you had put him in main event spots, but not for championships and for other reasons, it would have been perfectly fine as long as he obviously won those feuds. So for me, I think if you were to have kind of had the Fiend go around, because he always said the Fiend never forgets. If you just had him go around and attack people that he had lost to over the years or that had taken advantage of him over the years, then that would have made sense. And they kind of started doing that. Like he was attacking legends, Mick Foley, Kurt Angle, Jerry Lawler. Obviously those guys didn't necessarily hurt him, but they were kind of poking at elements of like maybe he's just attacking people that he doesn't like. He's attacking the people that have said that he wasn't good enough or backstage said this or whatever it was, right? And I think similarly with the Wyatt Six, I would want to avoid championships or even wrestling storylines in general at all costs with them. Because why would they care about winning championships right now? I'm not saying you can't eventually get there,
right.
but right now, why would they care about winning a tag team championship match or winning the US or Intercontinental title or winning a world title. That shouldn't matter to them. What should matter to them is that they're together, that they are fighting for the cause that they believe is right, and that they are honoring Bray Wyatt's legacy. And importantly for their storylines, family always comes first. And anyone who says that they have a family and does not act like it or takes advantage of their family should be punished. And that is why my next person that the Wyatt Six should get involved with is Xavier Woods.
Okay. I like it.
Because the Wyatt Six can sit there and say, there's a lot of S's right in a row, I'm very sorry. Xavier Woods is pretending that he still wants to be a part of the New Day. He doesn't. He's jealous of Kofi. He wants to go on his own. And he's taking advantage of Kofi. He's using Kofi for his accolades. He's using Kofi because Kofi was a world champion and he's riding his coattails, or whatever the case may be. The Wyatt Six should be able to point that out and then ultimately bring it out of Xavier Woods. Now, obviously, all things considered, this should not have been the plan to begin with. I think it would have been Odyssey Jones that was going to bring that out of Xavier Woods, but this is a way you can still do that New Day turn and have it kind of make sense.
Right, right.
Have the Wyatt Six be proven right. The fans might not like it at first. The fans love Xavier Woods. They love the New Day. Of course he's not going to turn on him. Oh my God, he did. Oh no, they were right. Oh wow. That's crazy. They can see it. Now you give them credibility. Now it doesn't matter if they win or lose, which obviously you should win. But regardless, like it doesn't even matter at that point because they did win. They were correct, and that's what that's what winning means at a certain point, right? And so you do storylines like that where you find people that say that they have a family, but they're not really kind of going after that family or making it make sense. And if you want to go on the women's side, Chelsea Green can get involved with Nikki Cross because Chelsea Green's been basically using Piper Niven for years, and Piper can't see it. Maybe you go Tiffany Stratton or Nia Jax. Maybe you go Sonya Deville. Maybe you go. So there's all these different kind of ways that you can go with it. And I don't necessarily care which one you do first. I think it should be Xavier Woods just because I think that would be really intriguing. And the New Day really needs something right now.
Yeah, that was
Otherwise,
like you
they're
learned.
going to be dead in the water.
Set it up. That was already being set up anyway. So yeah. So I mean, I think that'd be a fun way just to insert them.
Yeah. And I know because, the tough part for that is, does that mean you're going to turn the Wyatt Six heel? You're going to turn Bray Wyatt's legacy heel? Not necessarily. You don't have to. The Wyatt Six have proven, yes, obviously they debuted by murdering the entire backstage crew of Monday Night Raw. I'm fully aware. But after that, they proved that they don't really have to get over by beating the heck out of people. They don't just go out there and jump Xavier Woods 5-on-1 and bludgeon him to death with no explanation. And then the next week on Raw say, we did it because we think he might be turning on. No, that's what bad guys do. Bad guys rationalize that way. You can have it where, they just kind of go out there and confront him and Xavier Woods backs away. And that happens several weeks in a row with no explanation. And Xavier Woods starts running like, what the heck do they want with me? I don't understand. And you do that for week after week after week after week. And then finally, Xavier Woods calls out Uncle Howdy and he says, what do you want with me? Why? Why are you doing this? And it's basically just like, you know why. It's because you don't care about your family. You say you do and you don't. What are you talking about? Of course I care about my family. I love Kofi. I love Big E. We can do. But then eventually those seeds are planted in Kofi's mind. And then it's a whole thing. And it can be a slow kind of process where they don't even have to fight each other for the longest time.
Yeah. Well,
And you can even say, like, Bo can say, I don't want to fight you. I want you to love your brother. Actually, I don't want you to turn on your family. I want you to stay together because family is the most important thing. That should be the ultimate story of the Wyatt Six. Is do that every story. And last thing, I swear, and then I'll turn it to you. Key thing. Now, obviously, this time it's good. It's a little different because I think you should do it right away. But it's a new act, so it's okay to kind of let it breathe and kind of give it be on the show every week. I thought that the Fiend being on the show every week was the worst thing that could have ever happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
Horrible. Horrible. He should never have won a championship where he would have had to defend it every month. He should have popped up once every 3 to 4 months for 3 years, 3 to 4 years. And every time you heard that screech, everyone went, "Oh no!" Like he's back. No, like, oh, he's gonna torture everybody for the next 6 months. No, it's horrible. And then he leaves again. I think that that's what you should do with the Wyatt Six. They don't care about championships. They almost don't even care about wrestling at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
They just care about family and they care about their beliefs. So
Yeah.
once they kind of take care of like a family situation and they are proven right and they obviously win whatever blow off match you want to have or blow off matches you want to have,
Mm.
then they leave because they're not needed. You don't need them.
Right. You don't. Yeah. You're right.
Especially
You
with a
don't need
2 hour Raw, you don't need them. You don't need them on a regular basis with a 2 hour Raw. For sure, you don't need them. And then when 3 months, 4 months down the road, another one of these situations starts to happen where there's some tag team tension, there's a faction that might be about to explode, maybe the Judgment Day down the road, the way it is, like, oh, Finn's going to turn on everybody or Dom's going to turn on everybody or whatever it is, right? Then they can come back
right.
and fight them and be the one that brings that story out of them because that actually gives you two stories congruently happening at once. I think that's how you should play it. I'm super intrigued to hear what you have to say, but to me, that's how I would have booked the Fiend. I would have kind of had him be like a specialty. He only attacks a certain kind of person for a certain exact reason at a certain time. He's not on the show every week. I would have the exact same thing as the Wyatt Six for the Wyatt Six.
Yeah. Yeah. No. I was thinking along the lines of family. Insert the Dominic Toretto reference of family here.
Yeah. Yep.
um. And I kind of thought of Braun Strowman actually in a way of where it's the Wyatt family was just Luke Harper, Eric Rowan, and Bray for a while, and then they pulled up Strowman from NXT. And then Strowman did his thing. Then Strowman kind of left. He left to kind of pursue titles, and left the Wyatt family
Mhm.
by themselves. And I feel like you could almost have like Eric kind of lead that charge
Sure.
of just saying, "Hey man, you abandoned me when I needed you the most, and you didn't come around when I needed even more." So kind of you could maybe even build a story there. Um, Build a story I think even between like Nikki Cross and Alexa Bliss, where like Nikki's like, yeah, it kind of left me. I mean, obviously there's personal reasons, obviously where Alexa left, of course, family reasons and stuff. But I feel like you could turn that into a storyline of like, you
Sure.
disappeared, you haven't came back, you haven't come back from me. So of course that's why I did do this.
Sure.
To me, that might be like too easy or too simple, but I think those two could be very, up there. I kind of like what you're saying with Xavier Woods. Obviously, the Odyssey Jones stuff is unfortunate. So I think that could be an easy replacement. For that to still get that divide between the New Day. Because I mean, who doesn't want to see Xavier Woods win a singles title? He's deserved a singles run for a long time, stuff like that. Kofi being on another singles run would be great too. But as the White Six as that device would be great. And yeah, I think you can make them a special attraction in a sense where, I don't know if I'd go as long as like 3 to 4 months of not seeing them again, but once or twice having them pop up. You don't need them for PLEs unless you do need a really big blow off match for something that they've been involved in. You know, I'm curious if they'd ever get involved in the Final Testament. If there'd be any kind of storyline there.
Yeah,
Because I
it's
mean,
another one.
that could elevate that act a little bit more. Because they were kind of picking on Xavier and Kofi a little bit there too. So it's kind of that all that's interesting. Um, So I'm very very curious to see kind of what happens with them. Very very intrigued. I think they're doing it well. I think after the American May storyline, yeah, let's have them take a break for about a month. Like I think they all like you said, oh
Yeah.
we're not needed, and then they pop up, or one of them pops up, or and like they slowly pop up into whatever the next storyline is. It's not like all four of them or Bo first. Like kind of leaving Bo at the last. It's like the when they're finally like kind of trying to confront someone, they all slowly take all four all sides of the ring, and it's like, and then Bo sets in, and it's like you said, it's like, why we're doing this. We're trying to get you to tell the truth. And yeah, I don't even know if you really need to label them a face or a heel either way. I think they're they think they're having righteous cause no matter what they do. And I think if they
Yep.
lean to face tendencies sometimes to get their point across, they have to lead into heel tendencies to get their point across. That's fine. I feel we're entering kind of an era of WWE where a lot of times you don't need necessarily people to be one or the other, because like we talked about Braun Breaker, it's like he's a heel, but I mean the crowds love him, so he's like he's a is he really a heel kind of thing, kind of what they did to Damien and Rhea, over time, and to where they're now faces, but wasn't like a significant kind of turn. It just kind of happened naturally because of
Yep.
the storylines they're involved in and stuff,
Yeah.
so yeah, very.
Let's be honest, Rhea's been a face for years. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
everybody's been cheering her despite the fact that she's been in Judgment Day. It's basically been they boo the rest of the Judgment Day, and then every time Rhea Ripley says something, they just yay,
Yeah,
like
oh yeah, of
you know,
course. And I think that's what's great about wrestling too. It's like,
yeah,
people are set up one way or the other, but I mean, it's, the crowd's gonna love people no matter what. It's like, yeah, love
yeah,
or hate people either way, no matter what. So yeah. For one more question for you. Curious kind of what you think about SmackDown right now. SmackDown is in a weird spot, I feel. You got
yeah.
Cody, you got Bloodline stuff. Is there a storyline that you like there? And I'm assuming it's not Blood Iron related. Maybe it is, but what kind of what storyline or storylines are you kind of really enjoying in SmackDown right now?
Honestly, dude, the tough thing about SmackDown is there's not really a lot of total storylines at the moment. I mean, you're looking at Nia Jax and Tiffany Stratton, and in that whole thing with Bailey and whomever else may be out, Meechin, I guess, right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got obviously the bloodline stuff with Cody. And outside of that, I mean, you've got, I mean, what the A Town Down Under might be about to implode.
Right. They keep teasing that. They've been teasing that for like the last 6 months.
Yeah. So like that's really all you have except for the one, which de facto is my favorite. I love that they are giving Carmelo Hayes and Andrade week after week to shine in front of these crowds. Because look, man, I'm gonna go back in the Wayback Machine for a second. I understand that the pandemic was super hard for everybody, including myself. I was locked in my parents' home for 6 months at a time with a surgically repaired shoulder, where I could only go to two places: my living room and PT. Those were the two places I was allowed to go. Not great. I was losing my mind. But the one thing that I had was Monday Night Raw every single night from 8 to 11. I got to watch Paul Heyman write a show that was completely around long term storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
He had Aleister Black, who's still one of my favorite wrestlers. Please, please come back. Um, please do. We will treat you so much better than you're being treated over there. Uh, Obviously, Aleister Black was a huge part of the show. Buddy Murphy was a huge part of the show. Austin Theory was a huge part of the show. Andrade was a huge part of the show. Like all these young guys that he knew were going to be stars one day. He had them on the show every single week, and he had these guys in matches against local talent or against guys like Akira Tozawa or whomever it may be, right? And he had them all in these matches where they got to showcase their skills, and he did it for months on end, months and months and months. Aleister Black was just kicking guys' heads off on Raw for like 3 straight months before he even had a storyline.
Mm-hmm.
right? This was slow burn. Now, I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen here, but I love when I get to see two wrestlers go at it every single week and just see who's the best. Sometimes you don't need championships. You don't need any of that stuff. Sometimes you just have pride. Sometimes it's just competitiveness and pride, and you just want to go out there and say, they had me in a match against that guy. I lost. I'm gonna prove him wrong next week. I wanna fight you again. And you just do that over and over again. And who knows? Maybe they do what they did with Sheamus and Cesaro, where they had a 7 match series. It went to the 7th match, and then they basically looked at each other and went, we're both pretty awesome.
Hmm.
Let's be a tag team and
Hmm.
let's do that. Now, I don't know if they're going to. I don't know if they should. But maybe that's where they're going with it. Maybe Carmelo Hayes and Andrade can be a nice, young, fun tag team out there that, it gives them time to shine. It gets them on the show every week. Or maybe one of them just goes off to face LA Knight and lose for the United States Championship, and the other one just kind of goes back to doing whatever. I don't know what's going to happen with that. But I know that right now I'm enjoying watching the matches. I'm enjoying the competitive spirit of it. And I'm rooting my butt off for Andrade to finish that sucker and win round 5 tomorrow, right? I think.
I believe so. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that's my favorite. What about yours?
Honestly, it's the same. You know, this Tiffany Stratton Nia Jax storyline is interesting, just from the fact of they keep on teasing the cash in. I think we're gonna probably. I wouldn't be surprised if that Tiffany holds that cash in for at least another few months, maybe into the new year. I don't think they'll do as long as they hold title as a hold as like Priestad. So I think they're gonna eventually, there's rumors of Stratton and Flair having a match, come WrestleMania time and stuff. So if they do that, they'll want to build to that. With her, I'm assuming her having the title at some point. Um, and I mean, yeah, but I mean, it's nice to just see a good women's storyline. They're involving other women in it, with like you mentioned and stuff. But yeah, Carmelo and Andrade is probably right there, number one for me, just from the fact that it's been a great way for Carmelo to not get buried as a call up. They're both great in the ring together. It's Melo's been fun to watch, kind of him get built, and it's so nice to have Andrade back in
Yes,
WWE. I got a taste of him like right before he left. When he was on Raw, kind of what you're mentioning. Um, and like you mentioned too, like the pandemic and stuff. Like I really got invested in SmackDown when the pandemic hit. Kind of right
yeah,
around that. Right before the pandemic with Reigns coming back. But then it's like, what else am I gonna do? Oh, hey, I'm just gonna click SmackDown on it's here every Friday night, right on network television. Why not? I'm
yep,
kind of disappointed it's not on Fox anymore.
sure,
It's but hey, I get NXT and these TW soon, so um,
right,
uh, but it's been really nice just to see those two kind of elevate each other in a way. My thought is kind of where they're going is, um, I think they're either going to do like a both get a chance to title against LA Knight, and then a triple threat, or maybe they'll do a triple threat and then each one will get a chance, and then they'll go back to, um, maybe they do go seven, a couple more rounds here after tomorrow, um, to where one of those is finally billed as number one contender, but then they kind of go back to it. I like your idea as a tag team. I think the potential is maybe taking one of them away from a possible Cody storyline, or someone for Kevin to face or something, or Randy to face. So I mean, I kind of don't want them in tag team because I think you need them. You could use them in other storylines, to where it's like, you could almost say Mello. Let's say Mello wins the series. Mello could be like, Randy, I'm coming for you next. It's like I'm taking these. I'm taking some guys out, and I'll take as many matches as I need to do this and stuff. But
sure,
whatever they do with them, it's nice that they kind of put them both on the U.S. title after a few matches together. But yeah, I'm curious to see, is tomorrow night the final time they face each other? Do we go a couple more rounds? Because SmackDown needs content. Because Cody keeps going back to the bloodline, and we haven't gotten that Kevin Owens turn that everybody keep wanting, and we don't know what they're going to do with Orton yet. And I want Orton and Cody to tag before they turn Orton on Cody and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it's so they kind of need them, I think, a little bit. So I mean, it's been good again. Remind people what Andrade can do, and give people a new fresh face in Carmelo Hayes. And, maybe Andrade wins last one, and Andrade's like, "Hey, I'm coming for you, Cody," or something. It's I feel like you could do a few different things depending on how they look at the end of it. But I don't think either of them are going to look bad after these series of matches.
Yeah, I agree. And there's also the Loman, the Loman, the Logan Paul that's looming around, right? So he
That's
always
right.
is,
Good
has
reminder.
an opportunity to come back, and you
Hmm.
never know. There could be a Logan Paul. Now, I don't know how big of a money match this could be right now, but Logan Paul versus Carmelo Hayes, Logan Paul versus Andrade, or whatever it is, right? Or maybe, yeah, triple threat, so just for just three dudes that want to prove that they're the best. And I definitely think that, especially if you did a triple threat between those three, if Andrade or Carmelo Hayes comes out on top, you got to think that that's pretty big for their career
Yeah.
on a major pay per view or PLE. Obviously now, it's going to be difficult for me to ever call it a PLE consistently, but you got to think that's going to be a huge win for their career. At that point. So you could do something like that. There's a myriad of ways that you could go. I mean, even if you wanted to do a crazy thing, which is do a triple threat with LA Knight for the US title, kind of like what you said, have it be a draw as to who wins the fifth match between them. They both get an opportunity. One of them pins the other one in the match to win the United States Championship. Say it's Andrade, just for the sake of it. Andrade pins Carmelo Hayes. They say he wins the series because he just pinned Carmelo and he wins the U.S. title. So LA Knight gets a rematch. He ends up losing. Then you can do Carmelo Hayes versus Andrade again
The
for the
title.
U.S. title, and then you can move LA Knight on up to face Cody Rhodes. You could, if you wanted to do that, you could. I'm not saying
Good.
that that's the best idea ever, but you could.
Yep.
You'd have to
Yep.
cut LA Knight's U.S. championship reign significantly shorter than I'm sure a lot of us would like. But at the same time, not every champion or championship reign needs to be 8 months long, right? So I don't think, I don't particularly think, in my opinion, if LA Knight lost the United States Championship, that anything would change for me with
I
him. Like
mean,
I wouldn't look at
we've
his
been wanting
character
a
any.
championship on him for I feel like a year, if not longer at this point.
Yeah,
And he was still over and over everywhere he went, and he'll still remain to be over everywhere he goes, just because he's great in the mic, he's really good in the ring, he's got some nice moves. Like his overness won't go away. So
yeah. And
yeah,
by the way, don't forget about AJ Styles too.
that's true. Yeah. Oh man, on one hand I'm like, man, what's going on in SmackDown? But it's like, yeah, it's that slow burn. It's almost like we're too impatient sometimes, and it's like, no, we gotta
Yeah,
let them cook, as
there's
many
things that
say.
are going to happen here in the near future that I'm sure are going to help with storylines. AJ may come back. Logan Paul may come back. The Rock and Roman Reigns will come back and kind of involve themselves in the bloodline. And who else may come in with the bloodline at that point too, and just kind of add to that. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's all different things that you have. Charlotte, like you mentioned earlier, could come back and really bolster the women's division that on SmackDown, no offense to all the women over there, kind of feels flat a little bit right now. It's kind of fallen flat at the moment. Now, granted, I feel like the undercard, the real undercard that's not championships are up, has kind of fallen flat a little bit, in my opinion, as of right now. But that can all change. So if everybody kind of seems important, then every story is going to be important. So right now, I think we do just need to be patient and see. Now, the only thing that I do worry about is Cody's just got no competition at the moment.
Yeah.
They're just recycling the same story with different chess pieces. And is he going to face Solo again? Is he going to face Jacob? Oh, that's fun. Oh,
But
he's going
it
to
is
lose.
him in solo this week in Steel
Thing.
Cage, so
Yeah, exactly. So like, it's until The Rock and Roman Reigns come back and really take the bloodline kind of out of Cody's hair for the time being, it seems like it's just going to be Cody versus the bloodline until somebody takes the bloodline away from Cody. And that's just kind of how it is. And I understand it. I mean, it's not like it doesn't logically make sense, but it's just a bit of annoying.
yeah, no, it is. All right, well, that wraps it up for our questions, Tyler. Again, I really appreciate you coming on the pod for the first episode. Thank you, everyone else, for tuning in for this first episode. Really appreciate you sticking around. Hope you subscribe. Hope you like the video. More content to come, and we will see you next week.